He was born to scarcity, grew up between warehouse boxes and sleepless nights, and carried on his back the weight of a routine that never gave him a break. His childhood was marked by absence, his teenage years by the daily battle to survive and study at the same time, and adulthood seemed to follow the same tired script of invisibility and injustice. But everything started to change the day he showed up late for a job interview and found out the woman he had helped just hours earlier was actually the CEO who would decide his future. What happened next? You'll have to watch until the end to see how a simple act of kindness can turn someone's entire life around. Michael woke up every day before the sun came up. He lived in a modest neighborhood, in a tiny two-room house where an old fan couldn't fight off the heat or the worries. He worked as a loading assistant in a warehouse, picked up side gigs at night, and still dreamed of landing an internship in business administration, the field he was studying with effort and faith. The money barely covered rent and his mother's medication, but he never complained. His grandmother used to say, "If you've got purpose, you've got strength to keep walking." And that purpose is what got him out of bed every single day. No luxuries, no help, but with dignity. That morning felt like any other. But fate, the old storyteller, decided to flip the script. On his way to a job interview, Michael saw a woman being mugged at the subway entrance. She was shouting, clearly shaken, trying to hold on her bag. Without thinking twice, Michael ran toward them, tackled the thief, and managed to get her things back. She was trembling, breathing hard, eyes filled with tears, and her knees scraped. "Are you okay?" he asked, still catching his breath. She just nodded, giving him a look full of gratitude. Michael helped her to her feet, bought her a bottle of water, wiped her knees with paper towels, and stayed by her side until a car came to pick her up. Even with the clock screaming that he was running late, he didn't leave her alone. "You're going to miss something important because of me," she murmured, clearly moved. But he just smiled and said, "You can always look for another job. Life, you don't find that on every corner." With a shy nod, he left, late, sweaty, and with no clue that this moment would change everything. When he got to the company, Michael saw he was already 20 minutes past his scheduled time. The receptionist, cold and formal, said the CEO was strict about punctuality and likely wouldn't see him. Still, he insisted, "Please, just let me explain." She let him wait, though not hopefully. The waiting area was luxurious. His wrinkled shirt and worn-out shoes looked out of place, even offensive. He clutched his resume with trembling hands, tried to rehearse something convincing. While he waited, his thoughts drifted to his mom, the unpaid bills, the empty fridge. But he also thought about the woman he'd helped. Was she okay? Would she remember him? When they finally called his name, he walked into the room with his heart racing. And the moment his eyes met hers, the world just stopped. It was her, the woman from the subway. Only now, she was wearing an elegant blazer, sitting behind the executive desk, her name badge reading, "Rachel Morgan, CEO." She froze for a moment, too. Then, with a soft smile, she said, "You showed up late." He lowered his head, embarrassed, and started to explain. But she gently interrupted, "I know why. I was there." The tension melted like ice in the sun. Michael didn't know if he should apologize or say thank you. But she just took a deep breath and said, "Have a seat. I want to hear your story. Take your time." What Michael didn't know was that Rachel also had a story shaped by struggle and resilience. Daughter of a seamstress, raised in a tough neighborhood, she saw in him the same spark that many executives had lost in the mirror of their own egos. "Today, you won't be judged for being late," she told him, "but for your character." And with that, the interview turned into a real conversation. The conversation became admiration, and admiration became opportunity. But what came next? Not even she could have predicted. Rachel asked for a little time to evaluate the other candidates, but her eyes gave something away. Michael left the office without certainty, but with his heart on fire. For the first time in a long while, he felt like someone had seen past the close, past the delay, past the statistics. And that alone was worth more than anything Resume could offer. The call had been made. The journey had begun. But the real challenges were just getting started. The next day, Michael was back at the warehouse, stacking boxes, making deliveries, blending into the noise, but something inside him had shifted. Even without a response from the interview, he felt different, more visible, more worthy. Like for once, someone had said, without saying a word, "You matter." And for someone who'd always been treated as invisible, that was rare. As he moved through his shifts, he kept replaying what he had said to Rachel, wondering if he had gone too far or was simply shown up as his honest self, flaws and all. That afternoon, just as the sun began to set, the phone rang. It was HR. A calm, formal voice requested that he return to the company the next day. "Ms. Rachel specifically asked for you to come in." Michael froze. His heart raced. He didn't know if this meant a job offer or a polite goodbye, but he chose to show up with everything he had. He borrowed a shirt from a neighbor, ironed his pants using an old coal-heated iron, and polished his shoes with cooking oil. Anything to look more presentable, even if inside he was still trembling. At the company, he was taken straight to Rachel's office. She greeted him with a soft smile and handed him an envelope. "Before I say anything," she said, "I want you to read this." It was a letter of recommendation. Rachel had written about Michael's character, his courage, his empathy, and his dedication. At the end, she wrote, "Real leadership doesn't begin with a title. It begins with small, meaningful acts, and you've already proven you're a leader, even without a badge." Michael fought back tears, but the gratitude was impossible to hold in. Then Rachel made the offer. He would be hired as an intern in the company's social project division. "I want you to learn everything," she said. "And when you're ready, I want you to lead." But she added one condition. "You need to believe in yourself as much as I believed in you that day." That hit deep. No one had ever spoken to him with such a blend of firmness and warmth. She wasn't just a CEO, she was a mentor the universe had sent his way. In the days that followed, Michael stepped into a new world. Spreadsheets, meetings, business jargon, goals. He often felt lost, like he was shrinking inside a place too big for him. But Rachel never let him fall. Anytime she saw him discouraged, she'd leave a sticky note on his desk with words like, "Mistakes are part of it. Persistence is what changes the game." Or, "You are more than where you come from. What you choose defines you." Little by little, he found his pace, learned the tools, asked questions, made suggestions. Slowly, he started to see himself in that world. One afternoon, Rachel took Michael to visit a community project the company supported in an underprivileged neighborhood. When he saw the kids learning to code on donated tablets, his eyes welled up. "That could have been me," he whispered. Rachel looked at him softly and said, "It was. And that's why you have the power to change things." That day, he realized something important. It wasn't enough to succeed. You had to give back. And he made a promise to himself. If he ever had a real voice, he'd use it to lift up others like him. Their relationship grew. Not romantically, not yet, but with a rare kind of intensity built on mutual admiration, honesty, and deep respect. Michael saw her as someone far beyond his reach. Rachel, on the other hand, saw in him a reflection of who she once was. What neither of them knew was that this bond, forged in effort and trust, would soon be tested. The world around them began to question the space Michael occupied and Rachel's intentions. The other interns, wealthier and more experienced, started mocking him behind his back. They called him the boss's charity case, CEO's favorite, the lucky poor guy. He tried to ignore it, but the weight was heavy, until one of them crossed the line, manipulated a report, and pinned the blame on Michael. The case made it to upper management, and Rachel was pressured to take action. In the boardroom, Michael was put on the spot, and for the first time, he truly felt like he might lose everything. Not for something he did wrong, but because of someone else's malice. Rachel looked at him in silence. The tension in the room was thick. The directors expected a harsh response. But after a long pause, she said, "If someone's getting fired today, it won't be him." She then presented proof that another intern had accessed and altered the file. The real culprit was dismissed. Still, Michael didn't celebrate. He walked out quietly, head down, feeling vulnerable, exposed, and deeply embarrassed. Even with the truth on his side, he couldn't help but wonder if it was worth it, fighting to belong in a world that didn't seem to want him. But the crossing had already happened. There was no turning back. He was inside that universe now, with its doors and its traps. And he had a choice to make, back down or push forward. Once again, Rachel left him a note on his desk. It read, "Pain is temporary, but persistence builds bridges to the impossible." The next few weeks were filled with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind, where you feel like you don't belong. Michael avoided the break room, ate lunch alone, and responded with short nods. After the report incident, even though he was proven innocent, he felt like the stares from his co-workers pierced right through him. Like he was always one step away from being tossed out. But deep down, he knew quitting wasn't an option. Not after everything he went through to get there. That's when Lucas showed up, a quiet guy from the marketing team who had been observing everything. One day, he simply sat next to Michael and said, "They only go after the ones who shake things up." Michael was caught off guard, but Lucas continued, "I came from where you came from. They think we need permission just to breathe. But we only have to prove it to ourselves." From that moment on, the two formed an unlikely alliance, a bond between survivors of different worlds, driven by the same desire to keep going. With Lucas by his side, Michael learned how to stand up for himself without being aggressive, how to speak with confidence, and how to make his mark through competence. Together, they pitched a new social project that aimed to include underprivileged youth in the tech sector. The idea was well received, but they still needed to convince the board, and that's where the biggest obstacles lived. Rachel supported them behind the scenes, but made it clear, "You too need to earn this on your own. I can't hold your hand forever." It stung, but it also made them stronger. During the presentation, one of the board members, Mr. Whitman, kept interrupting Michael with sarcastic remarks. "Are you sure those kids will know how to use the equipment? Or will it just disappear?" The room chuckled, but Michael didn't flinch. He squared his shoulders and replied, "People only learn how to use tools when someone puts one in their hands." The laughter died instantly. For the first time, he felt his voice carry real weight. His story wasn't just background, it was substance. His life experience was knowledge. Still, the test didn't stop. Cruel comments began circulating on internal company forums. Fake profiles popped up making jokes about his background, his accent, his clothes. Rachel called him in for a conversation. "Do you want to report this formally?" she asked. But Michael shook his head. "I don't want to come across as weak." She looked at him firmly. "That's not weakness. That's courage. Courage to fight the system with the right weapons." And then she added, "If you won't defend yourself, I will." Something shifted between them in that moment. Admiration began to soften into something more, something tender. Amid all the chaos, an unexpected invitation arrived. An international social impact conference, and Michael had been nominated to represent the company. It was a golden opportunity. But there was a catch. He needed fluent German, and he wasn't there yet. When Rachel found out, she offered to help him in her free evenings. And so, surrounded by books, coffee cups, and shy laughter, the two of them grew closer. He learned she had a brother who disappeared as a teenager. She learned he kept handwritten poetry in old notebooks. And just like that, admiration turned into care. But the rumors inside the company kept growing louder. Rachel is having an affair with the intern. He's moving up for all the wrong reasons. Michael was crushed when he heard. He considered quitting. "I'd rather give up this job than ruin your reputation," he told her. But Rachel stood her ground. "My reputation isn't based on what they say. It's based on who I am. And I'm someone who trusts you." That wasn't just a line from a CEO. It was a statement of faith, one of those rare beliefs that people carry with them forever. The trip happened. Michael presented his project to international investors, moved audiences with his story, and secured support to expand the digital inclusion program. When he returned to the U.S., everything felt different. People looked at him with respect, offered handshakes, even smiled. Those who once dismissed him now tried to get closer. But Michael didn't hold grudges. He just kept walking forward. With every step up, he remembered the ground he came from. And that memory kept him grounded. But the biggest storm was still ahead. An anonymous leak of internal emails exposed old conversations between directors, some containing baseless accusations against Michael and Rachel. The media picked it up. The company's image took a hit. Shareholders demanded answers. Suddenly, what had been a story of resilience turned into a crisis. Michael was suspended. Rachel put under investigation. And their bond, once private, dignified, was dragged into the spotlight, as if having feelings was some kind of crime. The hero had reached the edge of the abyss. The suspension felt like a silent sentence. Michael had to return his badge, hand over the company laptop, and leave the office where, through so much effort, he had written a new chapter of his life. There were no goodbyes, just curious stares and whispered conversations in the hallway. He felt small, exposed, as if his past had come rushing back to remind him he didn't belong there. He walked home with slumped shoulders, head down, and a heart in pieces. For the first time in months, he felt completely alone again. Rachel, on the other hand, was facing a pressure only people in power truly understand. Board members demanded explanations. The press speculated about so-called romantic favoritism. Her lawyers urged her to distance herself from Michael to protect her reputation. But she refused. "I can't pretend he doesn't exist. That would be cowardice." Still, she felt trapped. She barely slept, barely ate, and spent hours rereading internal emails, trying to figure out who had betrayed her. Deep down, she knew the enemy was inside her own company. Meanwhile, Michael returned to the same old warehouse where he once worked. He asked for a temporary job. "Anything. I'll unload trucks again if I have to." And they hired him out of pity. But he didn't want pity. He wanted a restart. He spent his days in silence, hauling boxes, mopping floors, fighting off the heavy feeling of failure. But at night, he wrote letters to Rachel, never sent, poems about injustice and dignity, ideas for new social projects. It was the only way he knew how to breathe again in a world trying to suffocate him. One of those nights, Lucas showed up. "You disappeared," he said. Michael gave a sad smile. "I got sent back to where I came from." But Lucas looked him in the eye and replied, "You weren't sent back. You were tested, and the test isn't over." He handed Michael a flash drive. "I downloaded everything. Cameras, access logs, internal systems. Something's off, but only someone with guts is going to expose it." It was a chance, but also a huge risk. Michael knew that taking on the system might mean he'd never return. And still, he agreed. With Lucas's help, Michael reviewed all the files. He uncovered that the leak came from a senior executive who had been trying to undermine Rachel for months. Someone who feared her rise and used Michael as a pawn. He gathered the evidence, printed out every document, and wrote a letter to the board of directors. He didn't ask for justice for himself. He asked for transparency for everyone. He signed it with his full name. And then he waited. A few days later, he was summoned to an emergency board meeting. "Are you sure about this?" Lucas asked. Michael nodded. "If not for me, then for every future Michael who walks through those doors." Everyone was there, the directors, Rachel, the board members. Michael presented the documents calmly, without anger. He laid out the manipulations, the unauthorized access, the fake emails. There were murmurs, sighs, and then silence. Rachel was visibly moved, too emotional to speak. Finally, one of the senior board members stood up and said, "This young man, this intern, just protected the integrity of our entire company." The executive responsible was removed. And for the first time, Michael didn't cry. He just smiled. A steady, grown-up smile. The kind of smile that comes from knowing exactly how much you're worth, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. That same day, Rachel called Michael into her office. She was alone. No blazer. No makeup. Just herself. "You saved me," she said. He lowered his eyes, shy. "I only did what was right." She reached for his hand. And that is rare. So rare. A heavy silence filled the room between them, until she whispered, "I love you. And I don't care if it goes against the rules. It's the truth." Michael took a deep breath. "It's the truth for me, too." And right then, not as CEO and intern, but as two whole human beings, they allowed themselves to feel what they had both been holding back. But the world didn't know yet. And one final test was approaching, to turn their personal story into something collective, to show that love, truth, and effort aren't weaknesses. They're the strength behind companies, relationships, and futures. Michael was ready. Rachel too. But they still needed to take one more step. One last leap into the unknown. One final act of faith. The storm had passed, but doubts still lingered. After the scandal and its fallout, the company underwent major changes. New board members, new ethics policies, new social initiatives. Rachel stayed on as CEO, but by her own choice, stepped back from daily operations. She now focused on mentoring new talent. "I want to plant the same seed someone once planted in me," she would say. And at the top of her list was him, Michael. No longer the unlikely intern, but the company's new social impact program coordinator. On a quiet Monday morning, Michael returned officially. He carried the same worn-out backpack, but walked with steady steps and a calm gaze. His co-workers greeted him with respect. Even those who once mocked him now stood silent in his presence. Because he wasn't just another employee anymore. He was a living story of resilience, effort, faith, and persistence. No title, paycheck, or ID badge could fully capture that. There was something deeper. He had won without stepping on anyone. He had endured without ever losing his kindness. The project he had pitched at the international conference was now being implemented in 10 states. Underprivileged youth were gaining access to technology, training, and opportunity, all thanks to a young man who once arrived late to an interview. Rachel stayed involved, but kept a healthy distance. They knew the world still needed time to see them for who they were, beyond labels and headlines. But there was no rush anymore, because what they had was real. And real love doesn't need applause, just courage and consistency. In the media, Michael became a symbol of conscious meritocracy, a new kind of professional, someone who came from bottom but rose with values. He was invited to give talks, appear in interviews, even to write a book about his journey. But he declined most of it. "I'd rather keep changing lives with action than with words," he said. Life had taught him that visibility matters, but purpose is irreplaceable. And his purpose was clear: open doors for others like him. At home, life changed too. He renovated his mom's house, paid for his younger sister's education, and started a small study group in the neighborhood where he grew up. At night, he'd read his old poems and write new ones. Some for himself, others for Rachel. Letters he no longer had to hide. Now they could walk together, laugh together, plan together. Because once the storm passes, you learn how to truly appreciate the clear skies. One afternoon, during a company presentation, Rachel turned to Michael in front of everyone and said, "This guy right here, he's our greatest investment." Michael was speechless. But then, in a quiet whisper, he replied, "And you're my first investor." They both smiled silently, like people who no longer need to prove anything. Like people who understand that when love is born from respect, it doesn't need to be declared. It reveals itself in the quiet moments of everyday life. The young man who helped a stranger at the subway never imagined she was the CEO. And she, who had seen so many ambitious faces come and go, never expected to find humility in its purest form, a selfless act of kindness. But it was that one gesture, spontaneous, small, and sincere, that changed the course of two lives. Chance made the meeting, choice made the story, and time shaped what neither of them would have dared to plan. At the closing of a major corporate event, Rachel asked Michael to come on stage. He hesitated. His hands were shaking, but he went and said, "I'm not a hero. I just didn't give up." The audience rose to their feet in applause, because in that moment, everyone understood. The true hero isn't the one who wins easily. It's the one who falls, suffers, cries, and chooses to keep going. And as Michael looked across the crowd and found Rachel, he knew his journey had come to an end. But the most beautiful part was that they were ready to begin another one. And that's how a story ends, a story that began with a late arrival, moved forward with courage, and was reborn through love. The story of a poor young man, a CEO who had stopped believing in affection, and a destiny that, though messy, knew exactly what it was doing. Tell us, would you give someone a chance if they showed up late? but had saved your life? Like the video if you believe character matters more than appearance. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these stories. Every day, a new story. Every day, a new reason to believe.